It is 3 o'clock. We will see if anybody shows up to this shindig or not. Hey, Shelby's here.
Hello.
Hey, Shelby, how you doing?
Good.
That's good. I'll wait a few minutes and see who shows up and go
All
from
right.
there. Sounds good.
We had a class last Friday, didn't we?
We did.
Do you remember if I joined that or not? I thought I did, but I don't remember. This week's been
Yeah,
hectic.
I'm not sure when they do these meet sessions. One of the options I wish it had was to send a list of who all attended the session. There's no, there. I don't think it records that for me. I'd have to write it down as we go.
Oh.
And Natalie's here. Wait a few more minutes. Let's do something. Oh yeah. Carolyn's here. We're up to 3. I'll wait about 2 more minutes and we'll get started. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Excuse me. Let's see. Any questions y'all had about anything? Notes wise, grades wise, anything wise?
Nah.
Okay, let me pull something up real quick. Yeah, so far, let's see, I've got 4 people who've turned in packets, and oddly enough, 2 of the 4 are in this little video chat. So yeah, just make sure, if you haven't, to go ahead and do that. If you have, you can start on 7 if you want. Let's see, I'm trying to think. I know I emailed some of you last night. Marilyn. Yeah, I emailed Marilyn, Natalie, and Shelby. So all 3 of you got the email I sent last night?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's got the rest of the Unit 7 notes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think,
If we haven't turned in the packet, and how do you want us to turn that in? Just take a picture of each sheet and send it to you via email?
yeah, if you wrote it out by hand, then that's probably the easiest way to do it.
Alrighty.
Just make sure the camera's clean so the picture's clear, because I've had some fuzzy ones, and make sure you're taking a picture head on of the page, because I've gotten diagonal pictures where like half of the page is cut off of the thing. Like I've had some really crazy ones where like they take them like this and the paper's like that, so like a whole, like you can't even read it. It's really bad. But yeah, if you send those in, I'll grade them. Trying to think. Anything else? You all got the reading packets and all that?
Yeah.
You emailed me the units, so I can do it from that.
Okay, I wasn't sure if let me give me a second. I'll double check while I'm on here. I sent this yesterday evening. Electronic version. Yeah, because the last thing that I sent home had the reading packet in it. So if you needed the reading packet to do the homework, I can send that to you if you need it. I know I sent it to Natalie earlier today, and that should have worked out correct.
Which reading packet are you talking about that we need for the notes? Or for the homework?
On April, no, it wasn't April. It was whenever, it was March 27th, I think was the last time they did take-home packets, those blue packets, I think they were. One of the things that was in those was the Unit 7 reading packet. So if you needed that, or for whatever reason, I can email you those, because you would need them for the last set of homework assignments.
Yeah, you already emailed me those.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
The only thing besides that and grades that I really wanted to go over was just the first set of notes that deals with Reconstruction. Did any of the 3 of you get a chance to look over those yet?
I looked over them, but I haven't written any of them down.
I've
Okay.
written them down.
Okay. Any of y'all have any questions or issues with the notes?
No.
Okay. Basically, the first set of notes kind of sets up a power struggle over Reconstruction once it tells you what Reconstruction is. Basically, it's this idea that the South has been torn up, not just economically, not just the fact that you have a lot of torn up farms and torn up cities and torn up railroads, but society is torn up. You know, Southern society was built on slavery for over 100 years. And now the question is, how is Southern society going to get by or make do without slavery? And so part of Reconstruction is to get the South to adjust to this new social situation as well. So Lincoln, before he got shot, he had already come up with some plans for Reconstruction. And remember, Lincoln, does he want to punish the South, or does he want to go easy on the South?
Go easy on them.
Right, and can you tell me why?
Because he said that if he, like, punished them, then they would try and, like, come back stronger and try and defeat them again, and they couldn't,
Right.
like, take another war.
Yeah, you don't want the South starting to think about how they got done wrong and, they're going to want revenge. So Lincoln's plan is to go easy on the South. And so his plan was called the 10% plan. Basically, you take the people who voted in 1860, who were white people, okay, you got 10 of them, and 9 of them can hate the North forever and ever. But if you get one guy out of 10 to say, hey, I'm sorry, I did wrong, I shouldn't have done what I did, if you can get that percentage throughout any of these 11 states, then Lincoln says, hey, it's all good. You guys will come around in your own time. I'm going to let you guys, elect people to Congress, run your state your way, all of that stuff. We're going to treat you like normal states again, like the Civil War never even happened, except for the fact that the high-ranking people like Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, the big guys like that, they don't get their rights back. They might get punished later, they might not, but we're not going to treat them normal. And there are no more situations where slavery is going to be allowed. But all the rest of it, that's up to them. All they got to do is, swear, hey, I promise I'm never going to fight the Union again. What I did was wrong. I'm sorry. And it's all good. Of course, Lincoln gets shot, and who takes his place? That's a question mark.
Was it Andrew Jackson? Sorry.
Not Jackson. He's the guy on the 20. He's from units 4 and 5 and 3 too. This is Andrew Johnson, and a lot of kids mix them up. So I'm going to try to help you guys out, keep them straight if I can. Give me a second. Pull this up. That works. Project this real quick. All right. You guys seeing okay?
Yeah.
All right. So here's Andrew Jackson, guy on the $20 bill. Well, he's very wealthy. Okay. He kind of has like this, distinguished look, like, looks like a well-to-do guy. To me, he does anyway. All right. You compare that with Andrew Johnson, and I do not see a fancy-looking dude here. Every one of these pictures, almost, it looks like he just ate a bag of lemons.
Yeah.
Okay. So Andrew Johnson is like, the opposite personality-wise. He's got a very similar name, but not similar as far as the life story. Another way you might remember it too, I just thought of this, is Jackson is alphabetically before Johnson, and Jackson was president before Johnson. So that might be another way to help. But so Andrew Johnson is the first president to take office after an assassination. And he wants to continue Lincoln's plan. I'll go into the plan. He doesn't even want a 10% plan. He says any small group is okay with him. So if you get like 10 or 12 or 50 guys, write up a letter and they all sign it and send it to the White House, then Johnson's going to say, okay, North Carolina or Texas or Mississippi is going to be treated like any other state. Who he blames for the war is the planter class. And did any of you guys read or watch the video why he blamed the planter class for the war?
Wasn't it the most recent warm up?
Yeah, it was today's if you did today's.
No, I haven't done it yet.
Okay. Johnson, I just said Johnson doesn't seem to be from a high off background, right?
Yeah.
Johnson was, I believe, the last president we've had who never went to school. Johnson did not have money to go to school. In fact, Johnson did not even know how to read until he was in his mid-20s. His wife was a teacher. His wife taught him how to read. And he lived out in the woods up in the Appalachian Mountains. And one of the things that I tried to teach at the start of the Civil War unit was the people in the mountains of the South, were they very supportive or not very supportive of the Confederates?
Not very supportive.
Correct. In fact, a lot of them didn't want to be part of the Confederacy. They wanted to remain in the Union. And that's how you get West Virginia. You know, a whole bunch of counties who didn't want to be part of the Confederates, they broke off, formed their own state, and rejoined the Union. So you have these mountains in eastern Tennessee where Johnson spent his adult life. They didn't want to be part of the Confederates, and Johnson was the only senator from the South to not resign in the Senate. And so he joined the Army, actually, and helped the Union Army fight. And Lincoln put him in charge as the military governor of Tennessee. And so when his reelection came around in 64, Lincoln said, here's a guy I should pick because I'm from the North, he's from the South. I'm a Republican, he's a Democrat. But we all believe the Union should come together, and that's the big thing. And so he picked Johnson as his vice president. And when Lincoln died, Johnson tried to keep this thing, hey, let's go easy on the South. And he's mad at the people who started the war. And in his mind, the people who started the war weren't the mountain folk. They were the people down in the low country who had all these cotton plantations in South Carolina, eastern North Carolina, eastern Virginia, Alabama, Mississippi. He said, let's go after those people. Let's punish them. But, you know, remember back in Unit 5, you know, 90% or not 90, like 70% or so of white people didn't own slaves. So he's like, hey, we can't punish them for what the rich planter people did. And so he, you know, let the states get their power back very quickly. But the problem with that was that the South, you know, they had to free the slaves, but they didn't like them as people. They still thought they were an inferior race. And so the Southern states under Johnson set up all these discriminatory laws against these freed African Americans. They called them freedmen. So if I say that, that's where it comes from. You know, they're not citizens yet. We didn't give them citizenship. All we did was we said, you're not slaves anymore. So the South started discriminating and say, well, you can't meet in public. You know, you can't be on the street after dark, or you have to have a job. And if you don't have a job and we catch you out on the street during the day, we can even auction you off to people who need, you know, field workers, like slaves, for instance. And so this was really messed up. And so what you had happen was you had a group of people in Congress tell Johnson, this is bullcrap. This goes against what the war was about. And the name given to those guys, does anybody know? Who these people were in Congress who said, hey, you know, Johnson, you can't let this happen. You got to protect the rights of people who were slaves? Question mark.
For me, you're cutting out a lot. I can't hear what you're saying.
No. Let me try this. Y'all see him?
Yes.
This is the Speaker of the House of Representatives at the time Johnson is president. Speaker of the House is a pretty big deal. Remember, the House of Representatives controls two things that the president doesn't really have control over. Does anyone know what either of those are? This is part of your checks and balances in the government.
Bonds?
Did you say bonds?
Maybe. Yeah.
Bonds are a way the government gets what?
Money.
Correct. The House of Representatives has to do anything dealing with money before anybody else gets any input. Can't start with the president. It can't start with the House or the Senate. It can only start from the House. So this guy here has a lot of power as far as what he's going to give money to. If he doesn't like it, he's going to cut him off money-wise. The other thing the House gets to do is if the House is pissed off at somebody, the House and only the House, which means this guy you're looking at, can do what to that person?
Cut them off money-wise?
Even more harsh than that.
Get them fired.
And how does the House of Representatives fire the president before their 4 years is up?
Impeachment.
Correct. And so this guy, Stevens, is mad at Johnson for disrespecting, African Americans in the South. And spoiler alert, this guy is going to wind up doing what he can to impeach President Johnson. And he is the leader of a group of Republicans in the House of Representatives known as the Radical Republicans. All right. The Radical Republicans are a big deal under Johnson. And they're called radicals. We talked about radicals back in the French Revolution. Does anyone remember what a radical is?
Are they somewhat like the gosh, now I can't remember what I was gonna say. Well, you know the guy in the 12 Years a Slave movie that was working with the main character at one point, and he talked back to the slave owner? I can't remember their names. Yeah. Are they kind of like those transcendentalists?
Yeah, transcendentalists were radicals for their day. And in 2020, a lot of people consider Bernie Sanders to be a radical. A radical is anybody who believes in a big level of change that the rest of society isn't ready for yet. And so, in France, it was a radical idea to execute the king in the 1780s and early 90s. In the 1860s in the United States, it was considered a radical idea that African Americans should be treated the same as white people. You had either a majority or almost a majority of people say, yeah, they shouldn't be slaves, but you didn't have a majority think they were equal to white people. Radicals did think they were equal to white people. And if they thought they're equal to white people, they said, hey, they have to be given citizenship. They have to be given equal rights under the law. And if the South isn't going to do that, the South should be punished for that. All right. And that's where, Stevens and Johnson are going to bang heads because they come from two totally different mindsets. Johnson doesn't want African Americans to have full rights and equality because he thinks it'll be just like the Irish immigration thing. He'll think that the freed slaves will compete against poor white people for labor in the South, and he doesn't want that to happen. Lincoln, while he was alive, thought Stevens was being too harsh on the South, and when they tried to make the South pledge a 50% versus a 10%, Lincoln killed it with a pocket veto. Basically, how a pocket veto works is like today's the last day of school before spring break, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to pretend for a second we're Congress, you three are Congress, and I'm the president. And you all pass a law and you send it to me in the White House and it gets to my desk and I have 10 days to sign it or to veto it. All right. Now, if you guys are around in 10 days and I just ignore the bill, it becomes a law automatically. But if you're on vacation on the 10th day and I don't sign it, it dies. That's called a pocket veto. It's like a real passive aggressive way to get what you want. And it's in the Constitution, by the way, but Lincoln was the first one to exercise the pocket veto. It's his way of saying to the radicals, you know, I'm not going to veto you outright because you're my guys, you're in my gang, you're Republicans, I'm a Republican, but I'm not going to just lay down and sign this just because we're all Republicans. So, you know, like I said, you're setting up this power struggle between the president and Congress. One thing that they did all agree on, Johnson, Lincoln, and Congress did agree on, is they need to come up with a way to help these former slaves. And they came up with a program to do that known as the Freedmen's Bureau. Remember, freedmen is the name given to former slaves because they're not citizens yet. And so Congress set this up, and the idea was when the war is over, you got like all these thousands of extra boots, you got thousands of extra socks, you got thousands of extra uniforms that you have sitting around that, you know, you were going to give to the soldiers when their stuff wore out, right? But now they don't need it anymore because the war is over. What's happening to almost all of the soldiers now that the war is over? Question mark.
Do they have like nowhere to go?
Well, if you're a soldier and there's no war anymore, guess what the army is going to do with you?
In a sense, just like fire you.
Kind of. I mean, you know, you probably wouldn't look at it as being fired because a lot of these guys, you know, didn't want to be in the army. A lot of these guys were drafted into the army, or they volunteered for the only mission, which was to, you know, crush the Confederates. Now the mission's accomplished, so all of these guys are going to go and live their life again, right?
Yeah.
They're going to go home. They're going to pick up where they left off, but they got all these extra uniforms laying around, all these extra boots laying around, all these extra meal rations laying around, all these extra mules that were in the army that they don't need anymore. And so Congress and the president said, hey, let's take all this extra stuff and give it to the freedmen so they can have, you know, some decent clothes, some good shoes that they can work in. You know, they don't have to worry about looking for food because all the markets have been torn up, you know. And so you start off that way with the Freedmen's Bureau, and then as time goes on, as you know, these former slaves need jobs, a lot of the white people who give them jobs, you know, they try to make them sign these contracts first. And so, but the problem is, what's the problem with a slave sign, or not a slave, they're not slaves anymore. What's the problem with a freedman signing a contract in 1865, 66?
They're not a citizen.
That's part of it. What's in the more fundamental problem? Any of y'all got little brothers or sisters?
Yes.
How old's your youngest brother or sister, Natalie?
He's 5.
If I gave your brother a cell phone contract that was 3 pages long and had him sign it, would that be fair?
Oh, they can't read.
No.
That's the problem. They can't read. Why can't they read? I mean, they're grown adults, a lot of them.
They have
They don't
education.
do-
They
Yeah.
don't have an education. You weren't even allowed to educate, you know, African Americans at this time. So, you know, they're going to get ripped off. They're going to be taken advantage of. So one of the purposes of the Freedmen's Bureau was they would offer freedmen to read over contracts and tell them, hey, this is what the contract says. If you sign it, you have to do this. You know, I don't know if you want to do that or not. So that's one of the services they provide. And then they also started to open up night schools for African Americans. During the daytime, they would teach the kids, and then at night, when the kids, you know, would go home, you know, you'd have grandma feed the kids or whatever, but then you would have the parents or aunts and uncles or whatever who were working, you know, in the fields or wherever that day. You know, now it's evening, they come home, and now they're learning how to read, they're learning how to write, so they can, you know, handle things on their own, you know, without having to rely on somebody. They can be more independent that way. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's probably what a lot of people consider the best thing that the Freedmen's Bureau did, was they started this system of public education, which the South never really had before the Civil War. And so a lot of these Confederate, ex-Confederate states are going to start thinking to themselves, maybe not out loud, but they're going to be thinking, hey, if the federal government is paying for ex-slaves to read and write, why aren't we paying to have our own schools to teach poor white people how to read and write? Because a lot of white people, like President Andrew Johnson, grew up not knowing how to read, write, add, subtract, you know, any of that stuff. And so this is when the South finally starts catching up to the North and having a rudimentary, basic level education system. Does that kind of make any sense?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it I had for the notes today. Does anybody have any questions about anything else? Grades, assignments, anything like that at all?
The notes that you gave us for March 20th and then the 30th, they were like the same.
There should have been some overlap because I wasn't sure exactly where I started and where I stopped. So what I tried to do was I tried to do like a day or two where like the first notes were the same as the last notes, and then the rest of the notes went on into the next week or so. And then when it stopped, I kind of did the same thing with the third packet, if that makes any sense.
Oh, okay.
Anything else?
No.
All right. So if there's not, the next time we're going to meet is going to be our normal time on Friday at either 9 o'clock or 1 o'clock. That would be Friday the 24th. If you guys have any individual questions, if you want to do a video chat on those, I'll be online Tuesday and Thursday, the 21st and the 23rd at 3 o'clock. You can always email me anytime, and I'll do my best to get back to you quickly. I think a lot of you guys know I'm try to be pretty good at that. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right. If not, then you guys have a good, safe, and healthy break.
You
And I
too.
will see you back in a couple of weeks.
Stay safe.
Bye.
All right. Y'all take care.
Bye.
All right, bye.